When we lose someone we love, it can feel like we're not allowed to be happy again. It's hard to imagine ever feeling light or okay about everything that has changed so fast. Marie is here to talk to us about grief and joy that can sit in the same room together. Welcome to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Dyer. Today, we're exploring the topic that touches every single one of us at some point in our lives, but we really talk about it with this much honesty. My guest has walked through a fire that many of us fear most, and she's come through with a perspective that is both grounded and incredibly hopeful. We're talking about grief, more importantly, we're talking about the courage to love life again. Marie Alessi is a grief advocate, best-selling author, and TEDx speaker who has dedicated her life to changing how we talk about loss. In 2018, her life was reshaped in an instant when her husband, Rob, passed away suddenly from a brain aneurysm while he was on a work trip. Left to raise two children, two young boys, Marie chose to lean into the promise she and Rob had made years earlier, that if the unthinkable happened, that one left behind would create the happiest life possible for their children. That promise became a foundation for her book, Loving Life After Loss, and her podcast, The Unsilenced Grief. Marie now works with individuals, schools, and organizations to bring lightness into the conversation around bereavement, showing us that joy and grief can actually coexist. Marie, it's truly an honor to have you on the Champion Mindset Collective. Welcome.
I was looking forward to being here. Really, since our conversation, I couldn't wait to have this conversation on camera with you. So thank you for having me, Anthony.
Oh, look, it's a privilege of mine to have you here. I'm so glad that we're doing this. Before we go into a lot of deep questions, I'd love for you to share your journey in life up to the point when your husband Rob passed away.
I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I was born in Austria. I grew up mostly in Austria, a few years in Germany as well, back to Austria. And then when I was in my very early 30s, I followed a dream that I had since I was about 17. I had this really, really strong calling to move to the other side of the world and live in Australia. And so I moved here in 2004. And only 10 months later, I met my future husband, Rob. If anybody would have told me that I would get married another 10 months later, I would have not believed it myself, to be honest. But when Rob proposed 5 months into meeting me, my very clear answer was, of course. So, Rob and I were truly that couple that everybody looked up to. I'm like, you and Rob. And, it was just really, really beautiful. I remember our relationship as always being around love and connection. And we often said, how many people do we know who are as lucky as we are? And we could literally count it on one hand. As you said, Rob was, I want to just say, Rob was not my first rodeo with loss. So I'm going to quickly throw that in as well for good measure, because it will all come together when we talk a little bit further about the topic of grief. I actually lost my dad when I was 20, and nothing had prepared me for that. I had no idea how to handle loss. I didn't know how to deal with grief. It was quite dark for me for a good year, where I felt completely alone in all of this. And when I look back now, I often talk about the hidden gift in adversity. And one of the hidden gifts that I received through my dad's passing was to live a very present life and a very present relationship with Rob. So when Rob and I had this what if conversation, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We both said, we want you to create the happiest life for the boys and yourself. If something was to ever happen, I want you to create the happiest life. I handled grief so differently the second time around because of that conversation, and also because of the way I didn't know how to deal with grief when my dad passed away. There were so many learning curves thrown in. But so Rob and I had a beautiful life. We had two beautiful boys. They're meanwhile 18 and 16. I can't believe that I've actually got an adult in the house now, which is so different. And in 2018, Rob went on a business trip and didn't make it home. It was absolutely sudden, no pre-warning. He died from a brain aneurysm. So in the prime of his life, he was 45, super healthy, super fit. He was a surfer. So that changed life dramatically for us, as you can imagine. So this is as much in a nutshell as I can give you, the life leading up to his passing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I can appreciate that it will probably bring up some memories for you as well. And I can empathise because I've lost both sets of grandparents and parents as well. So I understand what grief is like. So I'd love to start with that promise that you and Rob made to each other because it's such a powerful anchor. Can you take us back to why you two even had that conversation in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. It was roughly not even 3 years prior to Rob's passing. And I remember one day he called me on his way back from work and he said, "Hey, babe, I'm going to be 2 hours late. There's an accident on Heathcote Road," which for Australians who live around Sydney would know, it is a one-way street, almost 30 kilometers through the national park. So there is no easy detour. If the road is blocked, then it's a 2 hour plus detour, especially in peak hour traffic when everybody's on the way home from work. And what we learned later was that a young firefighter had lost his life in a front on collision with a truck, and his young wife was at home with their 16 months old daughter. So when we heard that, it really hit home for us because our boys were only a couple of years old. So we had that conversation that night when the boys were in bed and we sat on our bed and we're like, what would you do if that happened to me? You know, it forced us to have that conversation because for so many people, a 2 hour detour is a huge inconvenience. You know, dad's coming home late and he might not be able to say goodnight to the boys before they go to bed or might be late for dinner, etc., etc., etc. But for that one young family, it meant that dad never came home.
Yeah.
And that really touched us. So in that conversation, it was a very long conversation. There was so much love and connection. Now, a lot of people shy away from a conversation like that. It's confronting. Yes, it is. But it is also very bonding and very beautiful. And it was very life saving for me, I have to say, having had this conversation that we thought to be theory, right? But in that conversation, we made each other that promise. If something was to ever happen, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. 'Cause that's what
Mm,
love is. Love just wants you
mm,
to be happy, right?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What was the first thing that you felt that you had to do for your boys?
So, firstly, I found out over the phone. The sergeant who told me, luckily, broke protocol for me because he was not supposed to tell me over the phone. But I kept calling and he kept seeing my number show up. And they were trying to reach someone, police, to send them to my house to tell me. And we don't have a main police station in town. It's a small country town. It can take hours, which it did, for anybody to show up if there's no urgency. For them, it wasn't urgent, obviously. And I kept calling because I knew something was wrong. I was actually the one who alerted the hotel where Rob was staying. I said, "Can you please send somebody up to my husband's room? Something's not right." And when I received the call, I knew I had to tell the boys. And in hindsight, I am so grateful that I had the chance to sit with them to share news that can't be sugarcoated rather than hearing it from a police officer. Of course, they get training in it, but for them, it's just as uncomfortable as you can imagine, you know? So I'm really, really grateful that nobody did come to our house to share those news from outside perspective, but I was the one who could share it with them. And I remember sitting with them, and I don't even know if I can say prepare because I had 7 seconds to walk down the stairs and prepare for this message, but I expected crying. I wasn't ready for primal screaming. It was really heart wrenching. And in this really rawest moment of my entire life, I had Rob's voice in my head. "I want you to
Mm,
create the happiest life possible for you and the boys." There it was, you know, I just knew this is the moment. This is the promise we made each other, and I'm going to take it and do the best I can. I had no idea how to do that in that moment, but it became my lighthouse in my darkest hour.
yeah. I mean, we all handle grief differently.
Yes.
And I understand the different stages of grief that we go through. I've studied the Kubler-Ross model.
Mm.
So I understand, and it's not a linear path either.
Uh, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote the Five Stages of Grief, never wrote them for grief per se. It was anticipatory grief. And she has been misinterpreted her entire life. Even she
Really?
herself, before she passed, said that her stages were always referred to as the five stages of grief, which they are not. There are five stages for terminally ill people, which is anticipatory grief. It's very
Yeah,
specific. And when you look at the
specific.
stages and rethink them, it makes so much sense because people have been trying to push a square peg in a round hole for decades with those five stages of grief, and because they don't apply. they apply for
Right.
anticipatory grief. The
Yeah.
bargaining, the denial, the anger, that is all because they know they are dying. But
Yeah.
it is not an overall arching. These are the 5 stages of grief. Even if you call them non-linear, they just simply don't apply. So
Okay.
I literally go through that process of explaining that in the discussion
Yeah.
in every second podcast I speak for, and I'm very passionate about it. That it has
Well,
been misinterpreted. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
for those
thank you.
listening and thinking, "Oh my god, now I understand why it never made sense for me," this is
Yeah.
why.
Thank
Yeah,
you for explaining that because that's something new I've
you're
learned
most
today.
welcome.
So there we
Yeah.
go. Um, yeah, absolutely. I can understand that now after you've
Mm.
mentioned that. So, how did you find the strength to even keep that promise in those early days?
I have a one answer for that. Love. It really is the one thing that gave me everything. My strength to keep that promise, my strength to show up for the boys, my strength to show up for myself. And I have to say, there was a lot of cocooning happening as well. Like, I didn't want to have other people come in. I was really overprotective of my boys and I would let close to them, even though I tried to keep their life as normal as possible. So they did go back to school fairly early within the first couple of weeks. However, it was very much on a daily basis that I was in touch with the principal of the school, their teachers, the school counselor, and they had a if you are not coping, you can go home anytime policy in place for them, which I was really grateful for. I never wanted them to feel forced to have to be there, but I could also see that there was a lot of benefit in staying in a familiar environment and have some sort of sense of normalcy in their life.
Yeah. Now, telling your boys that their father wasn't coming home, that would have been the hardest moment for you
Absolutely.
of your life.
Yeah, that's
How
right.
did how did you internally prepare and handle that moment yourself to
I
sit down with
didn't.
them?
I didn't. As I said, I have 7 steps down from my bedroom to my living room. We live in a split level home, and those 7 steps were the time that I had to prepare for that message. But I knew there was no preparing. I knew there was no sugarcoating this message. I just had to say it straight out, and I did, because there's nothing you can say to make this feel easier or different. It is a very cut through sentence that you have to say to them, and that's what I did. There was no preparing for it. And in hindsight, I'm thinking, I can see, looking back now, losing my dad at such a young age. I thought I was young. I was 20. I was combined older. Like, they were combined, not even as old as I was when they lost their dad. They were 10 and 8. I was 20.
Wow.
It's such a different stage in life to lose a dad. So still, I think when I look back on my life, everything that has happened in my entire life, in my childhood, in my losing my dad, in my moving to Australia, in becoming more and more and more independent and choosing independence over everything, I believe everything has prepared me for the path that I am walking now. So as much as you feel like you're never prepared for it, when I look back now, I feel like life has prepared me for everything that I'm doing today.
Those adversity situations do prepare you. They help you build resilience. And I mean, just reflecting over the experiences I've been through, it has helped me build resilience. And I must
Yeah.
say, losing my dad was the hardest thing. I actually always dreaded that moment when my
Mm.
dad was going to go. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
was very, very close with my dad. I also thought that was my hardest moment until my husband died. And
mm,
I always say, I think this is a perfect moment to actually share this here. I feel the most important thing that we can all do, whether we are in the moment ourselves or on the receiving end or on the giving end in terms of support, whenever we sit somebody with somebody in grief, to never, ever, ever compare. To never say, I know what you're feeling because I've been through it. We don't ever know. Even I have worked with thousands of people. I would never claim to know what they're going through. I can have an idea and there might be similarities in the journey, but every journey of grief is just as unique as the person experiencing it. Even like when I think, of my grief experiences, I've lost my dad, and in my early 30s, I've lost a very, very close friend very suddenly. I've lost my husband. All 3 experiences were vastly different. And I would not claim to know what grief is like for the other person ever,
yeah,
still not after thousands of people.
yeah,
I think
100%.
that's very important. Yeah.
Everyone's journey and dealing with grief is different. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you balance the being honest with with your sons while still wanting to protect them?
I think in a bizarre way, being honest with them is actually protecting them because, whatever you try to hide from them, you can't. Children are very observant. They have got a sixth sense. They are more in tune to their sixth sense than we ever are as adults because we unlearn listening to these senses. And going through the grief, losing my husband actually really deeply reconnected me with my intuition. So that's all I had to lean on. I had the promise I made to Rob and I had my intuition. And those were my two only tools that I was leaning on the entire time to just trust my intuition, trust my heart, and trust that promise. And that gave me a really good path going forward, even though I had no idea where it would lead me at that stage.
How has that journey been for the three of you over those, the last, was it 7 years or so? Seven,
It's,
eight
yeah,
years,
it's actually 8 years
8 years.
next week. So
Yeah,
it's been an intense journey. It's been a deeply rewarding journey. It's been beautiful. It's been hard. It's been everything. I just choose to never look at it from the perspective as it's hard. Because life can be hard, right? But if I choose to look at it from that perspective, I'm already losing. So I always look at the journey ahead of me as in, what do I choose to learn from this?
yeah,
Because, I've got a very strong spiritual understanding of what was been happening. I feel like I'm going to say this with a disclaimer because I think it's very important for this conversation going forward. My spiritual belief is that Rob and I have chosen that on a soul level. I didn't realize that straight away, but I had this, what I now call a spiritual epiphany, only months after Rob died. It was less than a year after, probably half a year, 6, 7, 8, 9 months after he passed. I can't pick the exact time anymore, but I picture exactly where I was standing when I realized that. And it was again in my bedroom. I was standing at the window and all of a sudden it hit me, I thought, oh my God, Rob and I have chosen this on a soul level. This was the path that we have chosen for me to do what I do now with my boys, with thousands of people that I've helped guide through grief, and with the movement, the books that I've written, with everything. The message that I put out there into the world is really always about changing the narrative of grief, bringing more lightness into grief. Nobody needs help with grieving. That's if you take anything away from this podcast, it may be this. Nobody needs help with grieving. Grief is heavy, grief is present. Everybody needs help with healing, with
mm,
allowing joy and happiness in. That's where people struggle. Nobody struggles with the grief part, but it is heavy if you don't allow yourself to heal, if you don't allow
yeah,
yourself to receive joy and happiness and healing in life, if you don't allow yourself to choose what you do with your life and make that a happy choice. That is what people need help with. A lot of people I work with just need somebody to say to them, you, Anthony, you're allowed to be happy. Your
yeah,
dad would want you to,
of course,
those things, sometimes so simple, but
yeah,
not for the person grieving. Sometimes we really just need to hear that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And my dad always said to me, son, just be happy in life. And so I always hold on to that, what he said. He said,
Yeah,
no matter what
good.
happens, be happy. And I guess that's probably why this podcast exists, because the the challenges and that I've been through has shaped me into who I am today.
Yeah, of course.
And it's helped me build that resilience, but it's also helped me heal a lot, because if we don't go through these hard times, we cannot heal. But we've also got to choose that healing as well, right? Bec-
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
because
People
we've
often
had,
ask me, can you help, can you help this and that person? And I'm like, if they're open to help, I absolutely can. You
yeah,
can't help anyone if they're not ready for it, if they're not open to healing. It doesn't matter how well trained you are in however many modalities. If the person is not ready for healing, you won't be able to help.
yeah.
And if they are, 100%,
Yeah,
I can.
and I've heard Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Joe
Mm,
Dispenza talk about this, where they say that the situation that happened was definitely hard and traumatic. But when we hold on to that and keep holding on to it, that's what trauma is.
yeah.
And I guess a lot of people get addicted to that trauma and they can't move past it. And yeah,
I'll say something to that as well.
mm,
When you say a lot of people get addicted to trauma, yes, And I want to specify that because I'm very familiar with the work of Gabor Mate, a dispenser. But when it comes to the addicted to trauma, it is the connection that they feel when they're sitting in the trauma.
Yeah.
Those people have found a connection with their loved one and have somehow formed the belief that that is the only way of staying connected to them, to stay in the grief. That's the only way of honoring them, to stay in grief. And some of them, I do want to mention it, even though it sounds a little bit harsh, but it's really important to hear this. There's something that in the coaching lingo we call the secondary gain. And often you have to ask yourself, why do people stay in that mud? I often refer to grief as mud because you feel like you're stuck in there and you can hardly move. And it's really, really hard to even lift your foot out of it. So I often think about what is my gain for staying in the pain?
Mm,
Nobody, nobody ever stays in the pain unless there is a secondary gain. There
yeah.
must be something they get out of it, whether that
Yeah.
is what we just referred to, that they feel the connection to their loved one, that they feel this is how they honor them, or sometimes even because people huddle around them and help them. And
Yeah.
maybe they have gotten used to that and don't want to let go of that because they feel that they might not be strong enough to do that on their own. And very often that doesn't happen on a conscious level. Not that people think, oh my God, he or she's,
Mm,
taking advantage of that. That's not ever the case, or very rarely, let me put it that way. Sometimes that might be the case as well, but not usually. Usually that's something that happens on a subconscious level. People are not aware of it, and that's why it's hard to break the cycle.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's good to hear a different perspective. I guess some of the coaching lingo we get stuck on, yeah, having a different perspective is important. Now you talk about, and as you were saying about the positive side of things, and you talk about bringing the lightness into grief, which is a phrase that we don't often hear. What
Mm.
does it actually look like in practice when the pain is still very real?
Yeah. This can come very often in just the small steps that we need. I love working with reframes, and I'm going to use one example that explains it so well because I work with a lot of parents, so a lot of moms, and often I would hear from a mom, it's more or less coming from that perspective. I've got no choice. I've got to do this for the kids. I've got to do this for the kids. I've got to get out of bed for the kids. I've got to do this and that. And I always look at them and I said, allow me to offer you a reframe for that. And most people accept it, which I'm happy about. And I say, when I look at you and I see you getting out of bed for your kids, creating whatever you can for them, to me, I don't see it as I got to. I would like to offer you the reframe of I get to, because we're dealing with grief. There's one person in your life that doesn't get to do this anymore, but you do.
Hmm.
So when you change your perspective from I've got to I get to, it changes from a burden to an opportunity. And it is such a gift, it is such a gift that I get to raise my boys. Unfortunately, Rob doesn't get to see them, like not in a physical sense, in an earthly sense. He doesn't get that choice to be there with them, to hug them goodnight, to say, I love you. He does that in a spiritual sense. I'm absolutely certain
Yeah.
of it. But I get to do this. So I can't possibly come from the perspective of, I've got to do this. I've got to raise the boys. I have not once looked at soul parenting from a poor me perspective, because let me rephrase this. I might have had one or two moments where I'm like, oh my God, how on earth am I going to do this on my own? But my general approach in soul parenting is this is such a gift that I am the one who raises them, that I am the one who's here with them, who's present. And I'm going to throw one other phrase in that I love. It's the irony of grief. The irony of grief to me is that we learn through grief. There's nothing that highlights that in more brutality and directness than grief, how precious life is. So we are suffering because a precious life is gone. So we
Mm,
realize how precious life is. But
hmm.
rather than staying stuck in the grief and in this life was so precious and now it's gone, you need to, this is your choice, you can apply that preciousness, that realization how precious life is to your own life. This is where I want people to be.
Yeah.
And the irony of grief is that we realize how precious life is, but then we stay stuck in grief. We basically waste our life as long as we are stuck in this and don't make a different choice. We are wasting our life too. And I
Yeah.
can promise you that from your loved one's perspective, whoever that is who has passed over, they would not want you to make this choice to give up your life too. They'd be
Yeah.
standing there going like, what on earth are you doing? You still
Exactly.
got your life. Do something
Yeah.
with it. Be happy. And look, this is not a flick the switch solution. It was definitely not the case for me that Rob died and the next day I chose joy and happiness and life was happy ever since. It took me a lot. It took me processing this and choosing it over and over again. It's a choice that we can make every single day, and not just every day,
100%.
every single moment with everything that we look at in life. We have a choice in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was
Yeah.
having this same conversation with a friend in Melbourne yesterday,
Yeah.
and I said, "You've got a choice." Now, when you were talking about the whole spiritual sense of Rob
Mm.
still having, like I mean, I remember when my dad passed away, I knew
Yeah.
that my dad was, even though my daughter wasn't even born yet, I knew that he was looking over her.
Yeah.
And I know that he's spiritually guiding me in my journey. So the question I have for you is, I would like to ask, would Rob be then spiritually be being there for your children through you? Because the love
Absolutely.
that you both had,
Absolutely.
yes,
100%. So I had to smile when you said that about your dad, because it was the same for me. My dad never got the chance to meet my husband. He never got the chance to meet my boys. And at the same time, I feel such strong guidance from my dad in my life. So often I see so much of my dad in particular in my younger son, actually, which is really, really interesting. And I see a lot of Rob in both my boys in different ways. Rob was such a passionate cook, and when I watch my boys with food, it's so similar, the passion that they have for food and for cooking. And my older son just started an apprenticeship as an auto mechanic, and my husband was an auto mechanic by trade and then worked himself into management in different areas in his life. But it was just, I can see such legacy
yeah,
in the boys' lives from their
yeah,
dad and also from my dad, who they have never met. And I'm going to share this here. I'm like, I've never shared this publicly in a podcast before, but I
go for
feel
it.
like I would like to
It's
share
a
this
safe
here.
place.
Only thousands of followers are listening to this, but I'm so ready to share this. I had this most beautiful experience only a few months ago, probably 4 or 5 months ago. I've been working quite closely with a beautiful friend of mine who does breath work. So he's been guiding me for an entire year where I did one-on-one breathwork sessions with him, and it always went way beyond just the breath work. He's very spiritual connected, has got a lot of beautiful spiritual abilities to guide me on this journey. And I worked with him previously already in smaller group settings. And every time when we went into breath work, I would meet with Rob. 9 out of 10 times, I would see Rob there. He would just be there, and I would always have the same visual. We would meet at the mountain lake, and he was on the other side of the lake. And when he saw me, he came over to meet with me. And I thought, this is so symbolic, him coming over from the other side. And obviously, your mind works with images, with symbols that work for you. And Paul, my beautiful friend who does the breathwork meditation, he said to me, it seems like you and Rob have found a place between the realms where you catch up. And we would just sit, and I would, have conversations with him. I put it under quotation marks because it was like sort of in my mind, what I was saying, what he was saying. But then when we started working one on one, we went deeper and deeper into these experiences. And in one very deep experience, I had a beautiful meditation. It went on for quite some time, but the gist of it was that I was surrounded by a circle of ancestors. And right in the middle, opposite of that circle, Rob stood and revealed himself as my spiritual guide. And I
Yeah,
was so overwhelmed with so much love. And I thought, how could I have not seen this? Because
yeah,
we were both in our human form, but when I was
yeah,
in that meditation and him on the other side of the veil, it was a really, really strong experience that I had. And it helped me so much leaning into that guidance and allowing that in and not even questioning anything. It was just like, yep, of course, that makes so
yeah.
much sense, in a nutshell. But that was absolutely amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
that would have been at a totally different was it metaphysical as they
Yeah,
call it,
probably. Yeah.
at that level where
Yeah.
you're almost going out of your body and actually
Yeah, it was
yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
surreal when all of that happened.
Do you
Yeah,
know, I have
amazing.
a little short story to share. So
Sure.
when my daughter was little, when she was just after she was born, I had this dream, had this vision of my father coming out of it was like morning, And he comes out of the bedroom and he goes, "Morning." And I said, "Oh, Dad, have you?" I think I said something like, "Dad, have you met Olivia?" He says, "Oh, yeah, yeah, we've been chatting and stuff and stuff." And I was like, "Wow!" And like he'd passed in 2012, and Olivia wasn't born until 2014. So I knew that he had his hand on her, and that,
It's so beautiful.
and just like you and Rob, I know that my father is there as a spiritual guide. And then a few years ago, I went to this clairvoyant to get like a aura scan done. And the guy said to me, he says, "I can see lots of green behind you and your aura." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" He says, "Well, I can actually see all of your spiritual guides standing right behind you. They were all my family." And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." So, they're always with us. If we allow them to be there, they will always be with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I've got a question for you. So, why do we think we're so afraid of seeing lightness in the grief?
I think in short, the quickest answer for that is because most of us, and I don't even want to say us anymore because I don't count myself in, but in terms of society, see that as the best form of honoring our loved ones. And if we were to bring lightness, laughter, joy in, it is often seen as dishonoring. This is what you do. You grieve, and there are a lot of phrases that we use around grief, like "my condolences" and "so sorry for your loss." All these things, I don't use any of those phrases anymore because to me, it is almost like I am potentially dishonoring their spiritual belief of where they stand. I don't know anything about, like, if you and I would have never chatted before this conversation, I would have no idea where you stand with your spiritual belief. So if
Mm,
I come in with my condolences, this is a conversation stopper. It is drawing a line between you and I. You are now in the grieving space, and I'm in the
mm.
I've said my sentence and I can go. It doesn't open a conversation. I think we need to have a lot more conversations where we actually learn to hold space. And this is if you have no idea how to handle grief, how to support somebody through grief, I literally just said it in one sentence: learn to hold space. We need to learn to hold space for people, which means we're not there to fix grief. We're not there to say some phrases and then we're done. We're not there to say, "Call me if you need anything." Anything, I mean it, really, just call me. This is putting the responsibility back on the person who's already in so much overwhelm and doesn't know where to start. And then he or she needs to think about what she or he could need so I can help and feel better. This is not working. We need to shift a few things around. And people think that if they were to allow lightness, healing, joy, happiness into their lives, what instantly jumps in is guilt. Guilt and grief are good buddies. They often walk hand in hand. And when I look at it now, I feel that grief is such an earthly emotion. Sorry, well, grief as well, but I wanted to talk about guilt. Guilt is such an earthly emotion. It doesn't exist on the other side of the veil. There's just love. There's just love. And when you put yourself into that perspective, into the purest love there is, and you look at us sitting here, you know, staying stuck and not ever wanting to experience joy again or choose joy again, what would that do for the other person? I
Yeah,
just feel sadness around that. I would not want that for Rob. I would not want that for myself or my children, and that's why we had this conversation. And I'm so grateful that we had that conversation. And I'm saying to people that I work with, even if you didn't have the chance to discuss this with your husband, with your loved one, with your child, whoever it is who passed in your life, I can promise you, from love's perspective, they just want you to be happy. They want you to choose life and live the life that they never had, even if you just do it for them.
yeah,
But I can promise you they would want you to do it for you.
yeah,
Make that choice.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and you spoke about holding space. For someone listening who goes, "What does it mean by holding space?" What would you say to them?
Being present. It's very interchangeable with that. Just be present. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You can if you want to. If you want to do something, do practical things. Help people out with practical things. Check their mail or help them with a to-do list. Help them clean their bathroom, their kitchen, cook a meal. But make it in a way that you offer a simple choice. So I'll give you the perfect scenario. Most people come in with, "Tell me if you need anything, anything." Again, it puts it puts the responsibility back to you, and you're already in overwhelm. So then people come in and say, "Oh, I'll cook for you next week. Let me know what you want." I don't know what I want to eat. I have no idea. Eating is the last thing on my mind. I can't
Exactly.
even think about anything. Like I'm so grateful that people are cooking for me, so I don't have to make a choice. But here's the thing. This is a fun story, but and this is not coming from a lack of gratitude whatsoever. But most people, when they cook for somebody who's just lost a person, cook comfort meal,
Okay.
pasta, lasagna, soups, like heavy, heavy food. But when you're grieving, you can't digest heavy food. You need something lighter. So my go-to when I help out with somebody who's grieving, I would come in and say, "Hey, I'm on your roster next week on Tuesday. I'm going to cook. Would you prefer if I cook you fish or lasagna?" Like, give them a light and a heavy choice, or give them a chicken, or, whatever. But
Or some soup.
don't go for the pasta, 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 pasta. It is the easiest for most people to cook. I understand that. But if you really want to help, be a little bit more creative and make it a really nurturing, wholesome, healthy food, because that's what people really crave and need the most, and don't have time or energy to even think about it, how to cook for themselves. So you're actually helping them on an emotional and on a physical level when you cook
Yeah.
something really healthy and nurturing and wholesome for them. And if you're not on a roster, then even give them a choice of day. "Hey, I can cook for you next week on Monday or Wednesday. What would you prefer?" It's A or B choice. That's simple. Make the
Yeah.
choice as simple as possible. Don't do more than 2. Don't even give them 3 days. I mean it. It like everything you can simplify. "Hey, Anthony, I can cook for you Monday or Wednesday. What would you prefer?" Monday, awesome. "I'm making a chicken Caesar salad, or I'm making pumpkin soup. What would you prefer?" Like super simple. 2 choices, and you can say A or B. And
Yeah.
that's how you help people the most.
Yeah. Any
And
any
and
more?
if you
Sorry, I
yeah,
was
I
just
just
gonna.
wanted to say, if you sit with them, just be present. Let them talk. And if they don't want to talk, be comfortable with the silence. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because any more choices, and like you said, they're overwhelmed already,
Yeah,
and they're not going to be able to
exactly.
make a decision on that.
Mm,
And so, from what we've been saying, and someone who's actually currently in the thick of the darkness, is everything that you just talked about, is holding space, being present, and then being there to cook and to do things for them, but to not overwhelm them by choices, but just keep it simple and saying, "Do you want this or that?"
mm, yeah. And don't ever be shy to talk about them, because, I feel most people shy away from mentioning Rob's name because they are worried that they might trigger me. I think it's way more triggering for me if people stop talking about him.
Yeah.
It's like he never existed. And yes, sometimes it might trigger tears. That's okay. It's absolutely okay, because most of the time they're tears of joy or tears of happiness because of the beautiful memory. And I think people are just uncomfortable with talking about death. It's almost like it's contagious. If I talk about it, maybe that will happen to me. Not that people would really think that, but they treat it as such. It's really interesting. People are not comfortable with talking about death or dying. And
Yeah.
it's the most beautiful thing that you can actually say to someone. It's like, "Tell me about him. How did you
Yeah.
guys actually meet? Or what was the favorite thing that your dad did when you were a little boy? What did you do together?" Like things like that. Wouldn't that make you smile? Wouldn't you want to
Yeah.
share a story?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there's often a lot of secondary pain that comes from guilt, especially when someone starts to feel a bit of happiness again.
Mm.
Why do we feel like joy is somehow a betrayal of the person we've lost?
Yeah, because society is so drilled in, this is how we honor a person. We grieve, we're sad, and all these things like grief will last forever. There will always be a hole in my heart. All of this is heavy and negative language. I don't use that language anymore. My favorite pendant to "there'll always be a hole in my heart" is, I much prefer to say "there'll always be a space in my heart for Rob." I love that, because it's like it's holding him in my heart, and it's not there's a hole in my heart and everything falls
Mm,
through. I'm like, I want to keep those memories in my heart. I love having memories of him in my heart. And it's such a more beautiful and wholesome and healing way to say it. Grief will last forever. I don't believe that either. It's a choice, again, even if that might sound very harsh or very confronting for those who are right in the thickness of it now. I can promise you it's temporary if you choose it to be. I look at grief and joy, they can be in your life at the same time. But the longer I was on my path to choosing happiness, to choosing joy over grief, or to choose healing for our family, the more grief became a visitor in our house rather than a permanent resident. there was a time where I really felt that grief overstayed her welcome and she needed to move out. And that's when Joy came back in, like she spent more and more time here. And I'm more than happy for Joy to be a permanent resident, and grief can come and visit every now and then
Yeah.
when I'm ready. And that is also something I had to learn, or chose to learn, that when grief came at a very unpleasant time for me, to say, not now. I will make time for you, but not now. Give me a moment, now is not the right time. I've got, friends over, or I've got things to do with, or I'm sitting with Joy right now. Can you give me a moment, But don't always push it away either. Emotions are there to be felt, to be lived, to allow them in. But you can also choose, like exactly like the other way around with Joy. There are moments where Joy might be inappropriate, and it's not appropriate to laugh out loud in whatever setting. So we make the same choice. We don't just burst out laughing when somebody is talking about something serious. So we can choose when and how much we allow emotions in, and we do the exact same thing for grief. I do like it, not in a masochistic way in any way, but I do like it when grief comes to visit and she brings some memories that I might have forgotten about, and I might cry about things, but it is always a really good cry. I feel connected to the memory. I feel connected to the pain. I allow it in, but then I also allow joy to come back in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the key is not to push it away, but is to integrate that into who
Yeah.
we are, right? Is to let
Yeah.
it come and then
Yeah.
let it go.
No emotion is permanent.
No,
So why would you choose grief to be permanent in your life? I
no,
wouldn't.
no.
Yeah.
And the more we focus on love, the more we get joy and happiness and all that, because
Yeah.
it is a higher energy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So for most people want to help, but they often say the wrong thing because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Based on your experience, what is the phrases or actions that actually make a difference
Mm.
versus the ones that hurt people?
Yeah. So for me, one of the worst things that you can say to someone, and this is just me, I'm just always highlighting that because for some people it is comforting and for me it's not. It's the my condolences, because to me it's a conversation stopper. It's sympathy. It's putting me into a grief corner. It draws the line between you and I. There's no conversation happening. I much prefer to say things like, my heart goes out to you, because it opens that heart space
Mm,
from me to you. And that creates a space where you can share with me if you want to, or where I just share my empathy with you. There's a huge difference in sending sympathies or empathies. Sympathy is a pushing away, empathy is an opening up between you and
opening up.
I. And I'm very big on doing whatever I can in my language, in my body language, in anything I can do in my emotions when I sit with someone, to open up a space rather than my condolences, or there'll always be a hole in my heart, or, grief will last forever. I don't use phrases like that, and I don't believe in them either. So yeah, it's more like whatever you can say or do in your conversation with people, what can you do to open a conversation, to open up that space between two people, and be there for them. Be the
Yeah,
one holding that space for them so they can come in and either feel emotionally held in that space or listened to. They would need someone to listen to them, and not a lot of people are able to do that. They instantly want to come in and fix things. Grief isn't something to be fixed, it's something to
yeah.
be lived through and listened to, and we need to create a space for that, but not, yeah.
And feel that
Yeah.
emotion through. I guess those words that have been around for a while are almost like sort of throwaway words that we use.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, the words that when we don't know what to say, we just say things because we
Yeah.
think it's the right thing to say.
Yeah. And it's also something that we're very trained in, this is what you say,
Yeah,
this is the polite thing to do. And it's funny, I thought about that just when I got dressed this morning as well. I'm like, it's interesting that I wear black today because I'm so big on, I don't have to wear black for, for grief. And often I do. I do love the color, and I actually steered away from wearing black for a really, really long time because I didn't want people to think I'm wearing black because I'm grieving. I believe in wearing beautiful multicolored whatever. I love orange, but today I chose to wear black, and that's fine too. But again, it's the choices that we have in life, and sometimes that starts with, what color would I wear today, or what would be his favorite color? What's your dad's favorite color? Do you remember what was your dad's favorite color?
Oh, my dad's favorite color. My gosh, no, I can't remember now. No, I can't remember.
It's okay.
But I do, like, I have memories of when I was a child. I remember my dad used to, because my parents separated when I was 5. So I
Mm.
used to sleep in my dad's bed. And I remember I used to, in the middle of the night, have him in a headlock so that in the morning when he would get up, he couldn't go away to
Oh,
work. Yeah.
yeah, that's so
And
sweet. I
that's
love that.
that's about all I can remember, because then from the age of 7 to 12 or something, I was in a ashram in India, boarding school. So I didn't see my dad for a long time. But the best moment was when I moved from Wellington to Auckland, and he came up one weekend to stay. And up until that point, he was always like worried about me, and he was like, "Son, are you making the right choice?" And but he came and stayed, and he said to me, "Son, you're doing a great job. I don't need to look after you anymore. I don't need to ask." And
I love
then
that.
yeah, and then when he had a brain tumor, which I saved his life the first time, drove him down to Wellington, got him into a hospital,
Mhm.
and he said to me, "Son, you are now the head of the family." And I was like, "Wow, that is full on, because I'm now responsible." And then the next thing he said, like before he passed, was, "Son, just do whatever you're passionate about." And there's a story from when I was 15 where I was told I was useless, I wouldn't amount to anything, which he realized at a certain point, and that he was wrong. But also, before he passed, he actually gave me his blessings and said, "Son, you just follow what your passion's just, never let anyone say what you can't do." And
Yeah,
no, I've
I
always had
love
that
that.
mindset. What is the most helpful thing that a friend or a colleague can do for someone?
It's interesting because every time I get asked this question, there are two moments that come up that were the most incredible moments for me in a real thickness of the first couple of weeks. And one was literally not even a week after my husband died. We flew to Perth because Rob died, 5 hours away from Sydney. He was in Perth for a business trip, as we said at the beginning. So we called the flight next day to fly across Australia to identify his body. And I took the boys with me. It was an absolute no-brainer for me because I thought that their dad has just flown across the country and didn't make it home alive. So there's no way I would fly on my own now, because for me, we needed to do this together. And when we came home a few days later, we were in Perth for a few days. I remember driving home, and you know that everybody has got that noise that signifies to the brain you're home. For us, it's driving over the drain at the bottom of the driveway. That noise that it makes is that you're home. And I remember driving over the drain and stopping the car, and I burst into tears. It was so hard for me, the coming home into a new life without him.
Yeah,
And up until then, we hadn't been back home, since Rob died. So we drove to his parents' place the night it happened, stayed there, flew to Perth the next day. And when we came home, it was so coming back into reality, basically. I remember I stopped the car, and at that moment, my phone rang, and my beautiful friend Jo was on the other side, and she said to me, "Would you like me to just come and sit with you?" That was it. And I said, "Absolutely, yes, please." She said, "We don't have to talk. We don't have to do anything. Would you like me to just come and sit with you?" Even now, 8 years later, I'm still so emotional just saying that sentence because it holds so much to just be there. So she
yeah,
did. She came with her son, who was the same age like my older son, still is. They went to school together, and she brought him with her so he could sit with my sons, which was so beautiful. And, for them to just have a normal conversation and just be together. That was one. And the other one was the night before Rob's funeral. A very close friend of mine came down from the Blue Mountains, which is like a 2.5 hour drive for her to drive down because I'm south of Sydney. She's, west of Sydney. And it takes 2.5 hours to drive. And she came and she said, "I thought that you might need somebody to be with you the night before the funeral because tomorrow there'll be hundreds of people there, but I just wanted to be there for you." And the entire evening I was thinking, I so want you to be there tomorrow. And I didn't know how to ask her because she's got 5 kids. She lives so far away. She's already taken a day off work for me. And even though in hindsight, I'm thinking, of course you can ask, whenever could you ask if not in that situation? But I didn't have it in me to ask. And we said goodbye. She was with me for a couple of hours. We said goodbye at my entrance door. And she looked at me and she said the same thing again. I'm so glad I came down because, tomorrow there'll be hundreds of people. I thought it would be important for you to have somebody with you tonight. And then she paused and she looked at me and she says, unless you want me to be there tomorrow, just say the word. And I'm like, yes, please. I was like, I didn't know until then, until she offered it, how to say it to her. And the next day, that exact person out of 500 people at a midweek funeral, I looked back behind me. We were sitting front row and there was Rob's family on my left and there was my 2 boys to my left and right, and then my mom who was here from Austria visiting. And then there were other family members. And behind us, the row of 4 seats stayed free because nobody dared to claim that, or it has to be for closest family. I felt so unsupported with that row behind us being left free. And I saw an older couple sitting right behind me, and I didn't know them. They just introduced themselves as Rob's family, but I've never met them. They must have been extended family because I knew all of Rob's family.
Mm.
So the other 2 seats behind me were still free. And I turned around and I looked back up all through the rows and they were like tiered seating. And I saw my friend Des sitting up there with her husband Ben, who came down from the Blue Mountains the night before. And I just looked at her and I just mouthed, I said, "Can you?" And
Mm.
she's like, "Me?" And I'm like, "Yes, please." And she came down and sat there. And in that moment, my heart was at ease. I was settled. And that was just incredible. I just felt so cradled in. So the reason I'm sharing that in so much detail is because it's often the little things. And it always comes down to just being there. She didn't do anything. She just sat there, but that meant everything to me.
Yeah, but that gap created something
Yeah.
in you but then
Yeah.
her coming down just filled that
Yeah.
gap for you. Yeah. How can we get better at talking about this in our communities?
I think everything happens just through being an example. If we do, other people will realize it actually feels quite good to normalize these conversations and not to, one thing I still have to learn after 8 years is how to tell people or answer that question without the energy dropping in a room. People would, it's a completely normal question. You go to a party, if you haven't met those people, and it's like, what do you do for a living, And I'm sitting like, how on earth do I answer that? I work in the space of grief. I bring lightness into grief. I bring joy and healing into grief. There's this, but as soon as you say grief, the energy drops, or the follow-up question is, how did you get into it? Well, my husband died, not that I say it in those words, but it's in my mind. I'm thinking, how can I say that without them completely falling apart and instantly feeling sorry for me? And I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I want people to have a conversation, talk about it. Very rarely people actually have a completely normal conversation. And I always point it out to them and say, thank you so much for normalizing this conversation, because most people fall apart or, it's just such and such is over there and they're gone, And I'm like, it's a real conversation stopper, something like that, which is a shame. So I think the more we can talk about it normally, and I often make a point in saying a few things about it, but then steer the conversation into a different direction so it becomes normal and it doesn't. And now I have to listen to a whole story about grief. I don't want people to feel like that. I want people to get healing and a new understanding and a new perspective out of that when I talk to them.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Mm.
Marie, how do you see the future ahead? I'm interested in
Bright and
how,
beautiful.
yeah, well, with your mindset, absolutely it is, because
Yeah.
it's what you make of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm interested to, how do you continue to honor Rob's memory while still giving yourself permission to grow and evolve into a different version, a newer version of yourself?
Yeah, I feel that everything I do is honoring Rob, because everything that we had together and that we created together is all based on love and connection. And everything I do is creating love and connection in a space where people need it the most and expect it the least. So my future, like what I think about in terms of career, in terms of the work I do with people, is very much based on workshops and retreats. Everything I can do to change the narrative of grief. So one perfect example that I'm very passionate about is my grief literacy workshop. And it's such a perfect name because it is a workshop that I am bringing to schools to teach school staff, teachers, and even school counselors how to actually communicate about grief. They are not taught at universities how to actually talk about grief. And I'm utterly surprised about that because 1 in 20 children here in Australia lose one or both adults, one or both parents before the age of 18. And that is solely to death. That does not even count in divorce, grandparents loss, sibling loss, none of that. That number, so 20% of our children lose one or both parents before they turn 18. And with a percentage like that, I honestly don't understand how this cannot be taught in schools at university, So I'm bringing this grief literacy workshop in to teach people language and tools and reframes around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are schools open to having that?
And I'm sorry, I got the percentage wrong. That's 5%, not 20%. But anyway, it's a huge percentage still. I should go back and do my maths right.
Yeah.
Schools are actually quite interested about it. I literally only just started offering it, and there has been a huge interest and people asking about it and what does that actually entail and what can we do. And I started with our son's school because I thought that is very suitable because that's where they started, our whole journey. This is when I realized that neither the principal nor the teachers, nor the school staff, nor the school counselor knew what to say or what to do. They all addressed me and said, how can we support your boys? And I said, you're asking me? This it's the first time I'm losing a husband. I don't know what you can do to support them. We did work it out together, but I was so overwhelmed. I was actually hoping that they would support me in that journey and not the other way around, help me support you, support me. Like it doesn't really make sense. So I'm very passionate about bringing that into schools and talking to teachers about that.
I was talking to a guy, Craig,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of episodes ago, and he said that when he was younger, he went to the school counselor and asked for help, back in those days, who wrote on a note, and this is in America, and he never heard back from the counselors. And it's
You are kidding me.
And he took it like basically I was just being stupid and this and that, And later on, obviously for him, that whole journey became him helping other people heal through her hypnotherapy and so on. But it's interesting how where people just don't even know what to say. I mean, for example, I went through many redundancies. Back in 2023, I was going through a redundancy, and my immediate team that I was part of, some of the people in the team did not talk to me for weeks. And one person did not talk to me even after I left, right?
Yeah.
And I actually had to stand up in front of my leadership team and say, why are you treating me this way? Why are you shutting me out? Why are you not even talking to me? Yeah. And one guy actually then stood up and said, hey, look, I didn't know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I said, well,
exactly that.
Yeah. You don't have to say much. You just have to come and, spend time. But it's interesting how, like in schools, I mean, there'll be, like you said, there's people who are losing people. And it's important that we educate the teachers that how to deal with these situations rather than just staying quiet, because
exactly
often the children are going to be looking at the teachers for help or guidance. With Rob not physically being here, how is your spiritual connection with him evolving?
I see it as intuition, actually. It is really bizarre. So I not often think about that, this is Rob guiding me through this and that. I notice it when it happens, but I don't know how to explain that, because I would often see numbers. So it's always the same numbers that I see when it's Rob talking to me, that's either 12 or 6 or 126. I see it all the time. And the other day it's so beautiful. I know it's not got exactly to do with what you just asked me, but I'm going to share this quickly. Rob used to watch The State of Origin with the boys when they were little. And when he died, I took over. And last week, the Blues were playing, and it was our thing. And the final decider was played where, the other team was like 20-0 in half time. Like, what are our chances? We did win, which was really incredible because the final decider was played and the time stopped on 126. 126. It was Rob's number. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. It could have stopped at any second, but it was 126.
126.
And I was like, oh my God, look at this. And I said to the boys, look at the number, look at the time. And they were like, oh my God, look at this, 126, you know. It's all those little things. I see a lot, like, you know, I would have a car drive past with a number plate Rob or whatever. And it's always on days where I have to make decisions. Is it a yes or a no? And then I see something, I'm like, okay, there it is. You know, it's, it's never in huge and life-changing things or always double rainbow or anything like that. Sometimes that comes too, but it's usually in those subtle, in those little things.
Subtle.
And
Yeah.
when you are open to receiving them, you'll see them more and more. The more you train your brain to be receptive, the more you will see that. And of course, people can say, like, oh, you're just making that all up or whatever. Well, everybody's got different beliefs. You know, I feel very, very, very strongly about my intuition. And for me, it's interchangeable. You know, you can call it intuition, you can call it inner voice, you can call it Rob's guidance, you can call it love's guidance. You know, what would love do? What would Rob do? It's very interchangeable for me. I think the fact that's most important to me is, are you open to healing? Are you open to guidance?
Yeah.
Yes or no? It's a
Yeah.
very simple answer.
Yeah.
And for some people that's a maybe, and that's okay. That's like an opening the door for me, you know.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
other people the door is wide open, and for others it's like,
Yeah.
nah, not at all. And the
And
not at all I can't work with, you know, and that's
yeah.
okay too.
Yeah.
It's absolutely okay. It's your choice how you respond to what life has gifted you.
And those subtle moments of seeing those synchronicities or numbers and just knowing that he's there with you, in
Yeah.
spirit. Yeah. Now, last question before we go into the quick fire round, and I will ask you to share a little bit about what you're doing and how people can connect with you. Is it possible to live a champion life after loss like this?
100%. I am. So it's definitely possible because I do.
So you shared a little bit about the workshops, and I would like to have an open door for you to come and join me on at some point and have a workshop together on
Mhm.
webinar or masterclass or something where we can
Sure.
help people through this movement. Now, tell us what you're doing today. You're doing TED Talks and
Mhm.
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And how can people connect with you? And what do you've got on offer at the moment?
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a TEDx talk that was in 2022 on redefining our image of a widow. That was the title because I felt very strongly about redefining that for me, for everybody else who needed it. I spoke at the Sydney Opera House last year in October, which was amazing. The talk was about Beyond Grief. That was my title. Under the umbrella, the overarching topic of the night was infinite possibilities. So my boys in the audience for the first time in a real life audience, which was beautiful. I have created a workshop. I've created so many programs and retreats for people, and everything I do in those workshops, in the retreats, in the one-on-one coaching that I do is about reframing the way we talk about grief. Offering different perspectives, how we look at grief, and everything is with a focus on healing, on joy, on happiness. And somebody just mentioned that to me the other day, and I thought, what a beautiful way to actually describe that. He said to me, it's like, there's this beautiful rainbow that was their life. And so many people just focus on that full stop after that rainbow rather than looking at all the beautiful colors, that person had in their lives. And I am a big believer that we need to look at that rainbow a lot more and live with that in our lives, with all these beautiful colors and talking about the beautiful life that the person had rather than focusing on that one moment. I don't want my entire life to be defined by that last final moment that I have in my life, by my passing. I want my life to be defined by what I do today. Everything I bring into this world, I want to leave a legacy. And I think all of us want that, or at least that's my belief. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe not everybody wants to leave a legacy,
No,
but I certainly want to. And I think our life needs to be about what we leave behind and not that closed door at the end. That would be very sad.
yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one.
Mm.
Definitely leaving a legacy, and this podcast is all about the foundation of this podcast is all about being the change in the world that you want to see, as Mahatma Gandhi said.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so
Yeah. I'm
when
also like it's interesting when you asked me before, my word for the year that I've chosen is collaboration. And you wouldn't believe how many collaborations have come into my life in the last 6 months already. It's incredible. So, and you just offered me another one. So that's really beautiful.
Yeah, look, what I'm building here is like most people on the surface will see this as a podcast. I just want to call it out and say it's actually the podcast it's more than a podcast. It's a movement.
Yeah.
It's a ecosystem. It's a community where every guest on this podcast is part of this community, and we get to change the world together collectively as a conscious, collective consciousness.
Love it.
I've already kicked off my first masterclass with one of my guests. So what I'm wanting to do is every week or every second week is to have a different guest coming and joining me. And and we,
Sounds good.
it's like often people don't get these opportunities to come and be part of these things. We want to create a space where people can feel safe and they can come and be part of a community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a whole academy that I'm building where courses and all sorts of stuff, events are going to be coming through that as well.
Mm,
So watch the space if you're watching this episode.
I will too.
Yes. So are you ready for the quick fire round?
Bring it.
Yeah. So you can answer these questions in a single word or a very short sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because the last guest I had today, he said, "Yeah, I'll be very short," and he went
20 minutes later.
Yeah, exactly. 2 hours later. How do you define success, and has that definition changed for you over time?
I define success with self-love, which is really interesting. And yes, it has absolutely changed. Success used to be something different, the money, the whatever. But now it's like, if you love yourself and base everything you do on that, you're already successful.
Who's been your greatest inspiration? And
my dad, because he was just so embracing life and he was so highly intelligent. He had a really high IQ and EQ, and I have taken a lot of inspiration from him.
yeah. Do you know something interesting that you said that your husband was a mechanic?
Mm-hmm.
My father was a mechanic by trade as well.
Oh, wow.
So
there you go.
Okay. What is something that you believe that others may disagree with?
That you can heal from grief.
If you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Love yourself.
What is one message that you'd like to share with the world?
Love yourself, really. It is, I think, maybe even add to that, learn to listen to each other, listen more than you talk, just hold space for each other. But it all has to come with a base of self-love.
Yeah. Thanks, 100%. And last question for you is, what does it mean to you to be a champion and have a champion mindset?
To stand up for a belief that you have, even if the whole world tells you differently, when you know that the belief that you have can heal the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marie. It's been really amazing. And thank you for being so open today. What's really stayed with me is that our chat is that the joy isn't an insult to the person we lost. It's actually the greatest honor.
Yeah.
The love that they
The most
had.
beautiful way to honor them.
Yeah. And the love that they had for us. It's about carrying them with us as we move forward rather than staying stuck in the past.
Yeah.
If you're watching or listening to this episode and you're in a season of loss, I hope you can give yourself a bit of permission to breathe today, to laugh, and have some joy. And please check out the show notes for Marie's books and her podcast, Unsilence Grief. All of the information will be in the show notes, but there will also be a page dedicated to your episode, and it will have all the information, including a article, a practical guide that people can download and start to reflect and may take practical steps in their life. And so, and please subscribe, because when you subscribe, the algorithms send it out to other people. It's surprising how many people watch these episodes but don't subscribe. So please help us by subscribing. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, then go to the Champion Mindset Collective website. There's a section there where you can just donate. And also, as I mentioned before, we are launching the Champion Academy, and you can go to the Champion Academy and join up now as a founding member and be ready for all the amazing things that are coming. There's a course I'm building at the moment for those of you who have been through transitions in your life, like restructures and redundancies, which can feel like a loss as well. And having gone through that myself, I'm building a course that's going to help you transition through that. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for being part of the Champion Mindset Collective. We'll see you next time. And you are loved. You are worthy. Champion your life. Champion your greatness. And have an amazing day.
And thank you, Anthony, for everything that you do. Thank you
for coming on the show.